Welcome to the first episode of First Light, an original science fiction short story compilation written and narrated by Scott McGowan. The following story contains depictions of graphic violence, including dismemberment, and a depiction of death by self-inflicted injury. These episodes should not be redistributed without express permission. Thank you, and enjoy the show. The Last Samurai, Chapter 1. Puzzles and Tea. Dawn did not believe in ghosts. To present this as a possibility would be a misuse of the word believe. She did not have the capability for belief beyond what she could determine as factual. And yet, the murmuring she had been hearing around the guild of a vengeful spirit attacking and killing teams of hunters on mission was disturbing to her. She gathered that the deaths were happening in and around an unmanned weather station in the tropical zone, and that they happened indiscriminately in daylight hours. The spirit would apparently disrupt communications with the guild somehow before killing its victims, whose bodies would be dismembered in most cases, beheaded in all. Missions in the area were being turned down by all but the least superstitious of hunters, and the station was at risk of being abandoned, its scientific potential lost due to a lack of upkeep and maintenance. Nobody wanted to die for a room full of computers in spite of its actual value to the colony. This was a most unusual puzzle. Clearly something, or more likely someone, was down there, was killing people. And yet scans of the area revealed no signs of life, no nearby settlements, no traces of the assailant. While she did not think their assertions were correct, Dawn could understand why people were calling it a ghost. It did intrigue her, but she was more interested in discovering how someone could avoid being seen by colony scanners and disrupt guild communications so easily. There was a clear gap in the information, and she wanted to fill it. She had her pick of missions. The board was rife with them, from area surveys to supply deliveries to small maintenance jobs, and she decided to perform a few experiments. First, she would take on a low-paying job like clearing some overgrowth. It was one that didn't require special clearance or rank. It carried with it a weather warning due to the tropical climate, letting hunters know that there was a risk of heavy rain and wind and that things could change at any moment, but no others. It was a job that they expected just about anyone could do. And they were probably correct. After taking the teleporter down to the surface and setting foot on the ground just outside the station, she got to work cutting away some of the creeping vines on the building exterior with her saber, the plants easily giving way under the heat of the hard light blade. Even working at a deliberately slow pace and taking extra time to prune some of the more hardy plants down to the roots, the job took her about an hour and a half, and she saw no one else while she worked. This confirmed for her that whatever the spirit was, it wasn't always present at the station, or at least not for the time she had been working. So she stayed on the surface a bit longer, walking around the building and peeking through the windows as the front door was locked and she did not have access. Inside, she could see large racks of equipment humming away, an array of blinking lights of indeterminate purpose. On the roof of the building was a large communications array, and every once in a while, she could perceive an electromagnetic signal pulse outwards from it. It was strong enough that she could feel the data in the pulse, decrypting and interpreting it as it passed through her and outwards towards the colony. It was, unsurprisingly, an update on the current temperature, wind conditions, and humidity. They happened infrequently and randomly enough that it was clear to her they were in response to a manual query, though she hadn't noticed any coming down from the colony itself. The sun was beginning to set, and she had still seen no sign of the ghost, and all of her limbs were still attached, so she requested extraction and collected her measly, but appropriate, she thought, reward for a job done. She used most of the ore to purchase a can of fortified tea from the vendor outside the guild. As she stood there, drinking the entire thing in one steady, unbroken motion, she took note, not for the first time, of the 2-inch square sticker on the bottom right of the machine's display. It was red block letters on a black background, and simply said, "Simon says, recycle your cans." She had been tracking the progress of this sticker for 3 weeks, noticing it after a trip to an offshore drilling rig in which her team was caught in a bad storm, and most of her energy had depleted by the time they were extracted. She remembered manually setting most of her systems into standby or low power mode, and she was desperate for a recharge. The can of tea she got from this vendor felt like having a weight lifted off her, and when she was getting a second one, she saw the sticker and thought it odd. She still found it odd now, but even more so as it had yet to be removed. She reasoned, perhaps, that High Command wasn't terribly upset at the message. If anything, they might encourage more of this kind of vandalism if it demanded good behavior. She placed the now empty can back in the vendor's open slot, and it was quickly taken back inside the machine to be cleaned and reused. She often felt like she wanted to take the front panel off of one of these machines just to see what was going on inside, to confirm her suspicions on how it worked. She thought she had a good idea, but was fuzzy on the details. She wanted to remedy that, but doing so in this moment would surely bring unwanted attention to her, so she decided to wait for another opportunity. On the train back to her condo, her pod alerted her to an incoming message. She interfaced with it internally and read the message in a fraction of a second. It was from Ruben, asking if she was on her way back. In a similar amount of time, she had already queued a response.
Yes, I stopped at the drink vendor outside the guild and was looking at a sticker.
Then she waited for Ruben's message back. She knew that he took much longer to write than she did, but she had the benefit of a direct neural link with her pod, while he had to tap on his with his fingers. Already a huge disadvantage, but he also needed time to think about what to say. After just under a minute, his next message came through. "What'd you get?" Her reply was instant.
Fortified tea.
Gross. It was a little ritual for them. He had tried the tea once and found it revolting, but couldn't explain to her why he thought that. She didn't find anything to be wrong with it. It was calorically dense, good for recharging her systems, and while she couldn't taste or smell it, she could feel the texture of it as it made its way through her intake systems, the slight carbonation providing what Ruben told her was a tingling sensation. It was novel, not like the plainness of most beverages, and so she was interested in it. Upon realizing he would be unable to accurately describe his qualitative distaste for it, Ruben had settled for just calling it gross. Ever since, if he ever saw her with a canned drink, he'd ask what it was, and if she said it was fortified tea, he'd say, gross. It was the simplest interaction the two of them ever had. The input and output would always be the same. She liked that. It occurred to her, thinking about it, that she liked it. She wondered why there was a distinction to that specific interaction, but she didn't question the validity of the statement. She did, in fact, like it. She tried to think of some other things she liked. Tea? She drank it all the time, but she wasn't sure about that one. She got tangible benefits from it, energy, unique sensations, and something in common with the humans around her who would also drink things on occasion. It would make sense to like something that gave her a reliably positive outcome. But she tested out the phrase, "I like fortified tea" in her head and found that it didn't register as truthful. She worked backwards from the tea through all the things she had interacted with in her day to make a note of anything that made sense. Out of everything she tried, there were only 2 that she knew to be factual. She liked when Ruben called her tea gross, and she liked the train. She didn't know why either of those were true, but it would be interesting to find out. At that point, though, the train had pulled up at her station, and so she put that puzzle in a little box somewhere inside her mind to look at later. Ruben was going to want to chat when she got home, and she needed to prepare herself. Chapter 2. Rest and Reason. Dawn did not need to sleep, at least not in the same way that Ruben did. She'd noticed early on that he needed at least 7.5 hours of sleep in order to operate at full capacity, and even then he would often augment his wakefulness with a cup of coffee, sometimes 2. She knew that this was a habitual action based on a chemical dependency on certain compounds in the drink, and that he would often consume it even if he didn't necessarily need to. She was able to find an analog to the first part, associating it with her own recently developed habit of drinking fortified tea after a hunt, but the second part she always found irrational. Inquiring about this behavior led to a long conversation between the two of them, breaking down Ruben's decision-making and how it was driven not by direct efficiency or hard logic, but by a collection of seemingly disconnected conditions and thought processes. At one point, the conversation came to an end when Ruben said, quote, "I don't know, I just like it." His tone had taken on an air of frustration, and it was something that Dawn would turn over in her head every once in a while when she didn't have more pressing things to devote her time to. She did, however, take some time during Ruben's sleep schedule to perform some more resource-intensive maintenance tasks. By putting her movement, speech synthesis, and high-level thought processes into standby, she was able to maximize efficiency for these tasks by devoting a higher percentage of her energy towards them. She kept her sight online out of concern of being attacked while immobile. It was a holdover from when she didn't have a bed like this to rest in, when errors in her processing would pile up and cause her to operate in inefficient or erratic ways. This routine, now that she had optimized and performed it with regularity, only took her 3 hours, but she would often stay immobile for however long it took for Ruben to wake up, as she didn't want to prematurely wake him. She knew that any interruption to his sleep could lead to errors in his processing. She found it interesting that in many ways he functioned the same way that she did. But she realized that her thinking was reversed. In actuality, she functioned like humans did, even on a microprocessing level, because she was created by them. One time she tried to think about what she would be like if another species had created her, but it quickly led to a circular logic tree. So she compiled her thoughts on that idea, marked it with a warning to not open the process back up, and tucked it away somewhere that she kept similar, untenable files. Even though she was able to charge her energy while resting like this and didn't need to worry about conservation, she had, as of late, taken to keeping most of the idling systems in standby. There wasn't much of anything to do while Ruben slept, so unless she had a high-priority task she needed to process, she was often lying completely motionless. Tonight was not an idle night. As soon as the artificial light generator in the room dimmed to a pale silver, simulating the moonlight of old Earth, she estimated how long her maintenance tasks would take to run, postponing them when she determined it would be the full 3 hours. She put all systems other than high-level thought and sight into standby and started replaying the events of the day from the moment she materialized onto the surface to the moment she left. She went over the way the vines crept on the exterior walls of the station as though they were trying to reach something that lay inside. She brought up a log file she made of the data being sent out by the communications array and scanned it for irregularities. She analyzed an audio recording she had made during the excursion for any signs of unnatural sound like movement, footsteps, speech. Her first pass found nothing. Her second pass was the same. She went through it 15 more times, randomizing the order of the data with each pass to eliminate coincidences. After 4 hours of high-intensity examination, she determined with 96% certainty that there was nothing unusual about the data she collected. That last 4% was the communications array. She had detected the outgoing data, it was nearly impossible not to, it being a high-energy signal, but had not detected any coming in. This suggested to her that there was a possibility the input signal was too weak for her systems to pick up. But she weighed that against data she collected about the colony transmitters and concluded that it was unlikely the signal would deteriorate to that level over that distance. This meant that the query had to have come from somewhere other than the colony. Perhaps, she reasoned, there was a hardwired connection to the station from another base on the surface, and the pings were coming from there. That seemed, to her, to be unusual and inefficient. There was a clear gap in the information, and she didn't want to leave it empty, but she was running out of time to perform her maintenance tasks and wanted to be at full operating capacity for her next experiment. As she queued up the tasks and put high-level thought into standby, it occurred to her that she was becoming hyper-focused on this puzzle. She made a quick note to herself, referencing something Victoria had once said. Don't get so caught up in one thing that you stop paying attention. In that context, it had been about lining up a long-range rifle shot and how it could open you up to an attack from behind. Dawn wanted to avoid that possibility. She entered maintenance mode, sight processes still active, and went to sleep. This has been an audio presentation of The Last Samurai, part of an original short story compilation written and narrated by Scott McGowan. If you enjoyed the presentation, I would encourage you to please share it with someone who might like it as well. This is a one-man passion project, and I really appreciate that you took the time to listen. Make sure you subscribe to the show on the podcast player of your choice so that you get notified of future episodes. Bye now.